Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Black Ops 6. After all this time, Treyarch finally speaks. They gave us a new blog post here today where they're outlining a bunch of the feedback they got from the beta and giving us some insight as to what they're changing going from the beta into the full launch of Black Ops 6 next month. Keep in mind, we're about 30 days away from launch, so getting this blog post now is actually pretty nice. There's some good changes here, potentially some bad changes, and a bunch of stuff in between, so let's just go ahead and check it out. First things first, the multiplayer maps. They talked about it previously, but they got the feedback from the community that the maps were all a little bit too small. They were all small to medium size, and there's really no variety in there. Like, every map was very fast and very chaotic, and they went on to say that every map in the game is going to be small to medium, basically the size of Summit or Raid, and they reiterated that it's going to work out just fine. They believe in the system, and they also went through and they gave us the TAC maps for the 8 additional maps that are coming at launch. Previously, we got a teaser trailer kind of showing aerial overviews of the different maps. Well, now we have the TAC maps, which I'm showing you guys here right now, and it's still an interesting choice overall to have every map basically be somewhere between the size of Nuketown and Raid. Not really having that map variety there is going to be different at first. I understand why they're doing it, because the vast majority of the COD community like those small to medium sized maps that are very fast paced, very chaotic. But I'm just curious to see how it's going to play out in the long term. I will say I think they did a fantastic job when it comes to the map variety, different locales, different scenery, different color palettes and things like that. So we're gonna have to wait and see how the maps play out overall, but a big part of those maps would be the spawns, which they addressed today. So here we see, as a key companion to maps, we want to update you on the spawn system. One of the most important reasons we have a public beta is gathering spawn data from our players. Now that we have 2 weeks worth of player data, we've already made big strides in dialing in our spawn logic and identifying and resolving issues within the spawn system across the game for launch. Players may have noticed improvements to spawn logic throughout weekend 2 of the beta, and as new content comes into the game and we generate even more spawn data, we're always assessing our spawn system and will continue to make necessary updates to it through launch and beyond. So what they're saying here essentially is, based on the community feedback as well as the data that they got during the beta, spawns are going to be better. But the thing is, they only had 8 maps during the beta, which, I mean, arguably that's a ton, honestly. Like, 8 maps in a beta is pretty good, but there's going to be 16 maps at launch. So those other 8 maps, the ones that we just looked at, they have no spawn data besides their internal testing. And as we've seen over the course of the past couple of years, the internal testing that the Call of Duty developers have versus what happens when the players get their hands on it are just 2 completely different things. Like, the maps that we had during the beta, they were testing and working on those maps for like 3 years, and then within an hour of it being live, we're like, so turns out you can just spawn kill people here in Babylon like nonstop, and there's really no way around it. And it's like, how'd you guys not possibly see this during your testing? Just, I don't know, it's so weird. They work on something for like 2 or 3 years, and then within like 1 hour, 1 match even, pretty much the community's like, yeah, that's broken. How did you guys not see that? But regardless, they got that feedback. They're working on the spawn system, and hopefully it's going to be a lot better when the game launches towards the end of October. Now, when it comes to the weapons in the game, there was a lot of feedback coming from the community in regards to the weapons, kind of how things worked. Of course, the Jackal PW was ridiculously OP during weekend 1. They nerfed it a bit going into weekend 2, but I'm not necessarily sure if it's the nerf that caused people to finally try out new weapons, or maybe they just got bored of using the same gun, or maybe having a couple extra guns being added changed things up. I'm not entirely sure, but weekend 2 of the beta, I will say weapon balance felt a lot better. And in here, they're not really talking about making any more balance changes to individual weapons, but rather they're talking about how weapons work overall, essentially, with headshot damage as well as bullet penetration. Here we see the blog post. I'm not going to read the entire thing out to you guys, but essentially, during the beta, to my understanding, headshot damage was not really a thing. If you wanted to have a faster time to kill with headshot damage, you had to run a certain attachment. Well, they saw that feedback, and they are going to be making it so headshot damage is a factor if you hit multiple headshots. So essentially, headshots are going to be more impactful than they were during the beta, but not as impactful as they have been in previous Call of Duty titles. So we'll see how that plays out. And then bullet penetration is going to be improved, hopefully. They said there's times where people are just being shredded through ridiculous amounts of cover, whereas other times there'd be a small amount of cover and you couldn't shoot through it really whatsoever. It was very inconsistent, and they're working on that, and it should be fixed for the launch of the game, which would be good. There's a lot of times where I felt like I was dying around corners, and it happened so often because the netcode was really wonky during the beta and everything, and it happened so often that I was wondering, am I really dying around corners, or can you just shoot through everything on like all of these maps? You know, there's times like this clip right here where I'm like, okay, this is clearly lag, but at the same time, on his end even, I feel like he had to have at least shot me somewhat through that wall. I don't know, it just, the hit registration plus bullet penetration caused for some really weird scenarios during the beta, and hopefully that is streamlined and fixed as we head into the launch of the game. game. Now, when it comes to movement, they're going to be changing up a number of things about the movement overall to kind of make it feel more consistent, essentially. So here we see continued improvements to animation fluidity and fidelity throughout. We've identified several areas for improvement to our third-person animation fidelity across slide, dive, jump, and supine prone. Our goal is that what you see in first person is representative of what others see in third person in order to maintain immersion and predictability. I have a perfect clip for this. I've showed it to you guys a couple of times here, but you know, on that guy's screen, I'm sure it was an entirely normal kill. Like, he used a little bit of movement, you know, and he got his kill and whatnot. But on my screen, dude slid like 5 feet, went prone, crouched back up, jumped 5 feet in the air, and then like, I'm like, what just happened? All within like a quarter of a second. And you know, there's some people out there, they're like, oh man, that's a skill issue. You just got owned. That guy just took you out. And it's like, no, even Treyarch themselves said right there, like, the animations are all goofed up. The servers can't handle the amount of movement. And essentially, it was just one giant bug that happened right there. And that was happening relatively consistently throughout the beta. Just sometimes when people would move and you would see them in third person, like, part of me was thinking, am I just old? Am I just this washed up? Like, I'm watching these people and the animations that their characters are doing with all within like a tenth of a second. I'm like, I don't think you can actually do that quickly. Either I am so old and washed up, or there's like some lag or something happening with the animations here, because these guys are able to slide, jump, crouch, go prone, and do all this stuff all within like a fraction of a second, and that's just not how games work, you know what I mean? So it was a problem with the third-person animations. Like, what they were doing on their screen was very different than what we are seeing on our screen, and apparently that is something that they are fixing going from the beta into the full launch of the game. They also note that there are going to be improvements to the fluidity of sniper ADS. I saw a lot of people saying that sniping was really difficult in this game. They just couldn't really get a feel for it. And I will say, from my perspective, as somebody who played a ton of the beta, I sniped a little bit. It kind of felt normal. I'm not the biggest sniper in the world or anything, but it felt fine to me personally as someone who doesn't really use it a ton. But I will say this, because of how small the maps are and how OP the Jackal was, then of course the brand new movement, I really didn't see a lot of people sniping. On occasion, you would have one or two people on the other team sniping. Mostly they'd be sitting back hard scoping on a map like Scud. Very rarely was I seeing people like running around quick scoping or anything, and your experiences may be different than mine, but in all my time during the Black Ops 6 beta, I really did not see a ton of snipers, so they're trying to improve that a little bit. Then we see improved fluidity when swapping weapons during sprint and tactical sprint, and then reduction of weapon motion during crouch transitions, and a small lift, this is balancing here, a small lift to shotguns and targeted adjustments across all weapons to keep submachine guns from overperforming relative to other classes. Weapon balance is an ongoing process and something we're working towards at every point in our live seasons. We'll be sharing specific details about balancing in our launch patch notes, so I guess we can look forward to that. That's a big thing, right? When it comes to every map being small to medium size, well, what dominates on small to medium size maps? Submachine guns, obviously. When you have a larger map, that opens up the variety a little bit so that sniper rifles maybe can dominate a bit more, where assault rifles, maybe even light machine guns or marksman rifles maybe have a bit more of a place on that particular map. But if every map is relatively small to medium size, again, somewhere between the size of Nuketown and Raid, then at that point, submachine guns are probably going to dominate, as we did see during the beta. So it will be interesting to see how weapon balance plays out overall. They're going to be buffing up other guns to kind of make them in line with these submachine guns, and hopefully that works out well. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. Now here we have a couple of extra things that they threw in here. The winner's circle is going to have a shortened overall duration, and they're going to be making it so we can only activate one emote in there. The kill counter is going to be added to the game onto the HUD so you can see exactly what kill streak you are on, which is nice. They're reducing overall camera motion on sprint, tac sprint, and slide, hopefully while also dying, by the way, because so many people are getting motion sickness by dying in the game because they wanted to make dying more fun. That's not what I said. That's what they said, by the way. They wanted to make dying more interesting, and it was causing a lot of people to get sick because the camera motion was kind of crazy. Sleeper Agent removed the time added when earning eliminations while Sleeper Agent is active. I saw a lot of negative feedback in regards to Sleeper Agent. I thought it was a fine field upgrade. It didn't really bother me that much. It was something interesting for sure, but how it worked was it was kind of similar to Dead Silence when that was a field upgrade in like Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 2019, where you activate it and then it has a short duration, but if you get a kill, it refreshes the duration. Sleeper Agent had the same thing, but they're getting rid of that because people were getting really annoyed of having people being on their team or looking like they're on their team and running around and killing them over and over and over, and God knows how confusing that would be in a game mode like hardcore. So yeah, they removed removed the time added when earning eliminations, which kind of nerfs Sleeper Agent while also keeping it in the game, which I suppose is a nice middle ground. Now here, this is really interesting to me because I would say that either using the red perk combination to get the Enforcer combat specialty was mandatory, so you basically have quick fix, or stim shots were mandatory. I felt like one of those two things had to be on every single class that you ran, and for me personally, I had stim shots on every class during the beta. They just felt mandatory, right? Well, here we see stim shot has been changed from inventory based to cooldown based by default. Now, they say by default, perhaps there's going to be a way to change that, but essentially what that means is no longer are we going to have 2 charges of stim shot, but rather we're going to have 1 stim shot that then goes on a cooldown after we use it. That sounds like quite the nerf right there, and with the health regeneration in a very fast-paced game like Black Ops 6 on those small to medium-sized maps, I'm wondering how that's going to feel. That does not seem like a very good change in my opinion, but that's just based on what I'm reading, and we're going to actually see how it plays in practice when the game comes out. But then Quartermaster Strategist will decrease the cooldown time on what? I'm not entirely sure what that means. Resolved an issue where the combat axe would not deal lethal damage at round start, so basically you can get your cross-map tomahawks at the very beginning of the game, which a lot of people enjoy doing. And then when it comes to the perks, Assassin and Bruiser, which were red perks, are moved from the perk 1 category to the perk 2 category, and then Dexterity and Gung Ho, which were perk 2s, are now going to be perk 1s. They swapped those around there, and the reason for that is to ensure compelling decisions are being made when putting together your classes. Okay, I mean, I'm not sure how that's really going to change things. Like, off the top of my head, I really can't think of how that's going to change things too much. Essentially, what they're doing is really powerful perks like Dexterity and Gung Ho are now going to be in the same perk category as things like Ninja and Ghost, which are blue perks, which I suppose that does make a bit more sense because the perk 1s were definitely a lot more powerful than the perk 2s overall throughout the beta. So maybe by putting the more powerful or more used perks like Dexterity and Gung Ho in the same perk category as Ghost and Ninja is going to balance things out a little bit better. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. But ladies and gentlemen, that is pretty much the long and the short of the new blog post that we got here today. I'll put a link to it down there in the description if you guys want to go through and read it for yourselves. It is nice that they gave us some feedback finally after the Black Ops 6 beta. Apparently more blog posts like this are going to be coming, and we're gonna be hearing more about the game and more of the changes that they're going to be making, which is fantastic because again, we're about 1 month away from the launch of Black Ops 6, and after having played the beta, it was clear that a lot of things needed to be adjusted, and they addressed a lot of that during this blog post here today. So I'm curious to see what more things are going to be adding, what more things are going to be changing, and what more things are going to be revealing to us between now and the full launch of the game. And as always, I'll keep you guys posted as we learn more and as more updates come out, more blog posts and more pieces of info. So be sure to subscribe if you're new around here because we will be covering everything between now and the launch of Black Ops 6. But for right now, that's the end of this video here today. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Leave your thoughts and feedback down there in the comments. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.